Have you ever noticed that the loudest battles in your life happen in complete silence? Not in the middle of an argument, not during a crisis, but alone, late at night, when the room is quiet, your phone is face down, and yet your mind refuses to stop talking. You replay the conversation you had earlier. You wonder if you said the wrong thing. You imagine what someone else might be thinking about you. Then one thought becomes another. Before long, you've created an entire future inside your head, a future that hasn't happened and probably never will. Your body is lying in bed, but your mind is running a marathon. You wake up exhausted, not because you worked too hard, but because you spent the entire night fighting invisible enemies. And the strangest part is this: you know you're overthinking, you know it's stealing your peace. Yet every time you tell yourself to stop, your mind simply finds something else to worry about. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I'm making the wrong decision? What if everything falls apart? Those questions don't make you safer. They make you a prisoner. Here's what almost nobody tells you. Overthinking doesn't happen because you're weak. It happens because your mind mistakes uncertainty for danger. It believes that if it can analyze every possibility, predict every outcome, and prepare for every disaster, then somehow you'll avoid pain. But life doesn't work that way. The more you chase certainty, the more uncertain you become. Centuries before psychologists studied anxiety, before neuroscience explained rumination, before anyone had words like cognitive distortion, one man was already confronting this battle every single day. His name was Marcus Aurelius. He wasn't hiding in a monastery or escaping the world. He ruled an empire. He carried unimaginable responsibility. Wars surrounded him. Betrayal was common. Disease swept through his people. Every day brought new uncertainty. Yet he discovered something extraordinary. Peace is never found by controlling every thought. Peace comes from refusing to obey every thought. That single realization has survived nearly 2,000 years because human nature hasn't changed. Your mind still creates stories. Your fears still pretend to be facts. Your imagination still tries to convince you that tomorrow's problems deserve today's energy. But by the end of this video, you'll understand why Marcus Aurelius believed your greatest strength begins the moment you stop believing everything your mind says. And once you understand that, overthinking will never have the same power over you again. Before we continue, if you're someone who wants to build a calmer mind and stronger discipline through timeless Stoic wisdom, take a second to subscribe. It helps this channel reach more people searching for clarity instead of constant noise. Now let's begin. The greatest prison you'll ever enter doesn't have walls, it has thoughts. Most people believe overthinking starts with a problem. It doesn't. It starts with a story. Someone doesn't answer your message. Immediately your mind writes a script. Maybe they're angry. Maybe you offended them. Maybe they don't respect you anymore. None of those things are facts. They're possibilities. Yet your brain reacts as if they're already real. Modern psychology calls this catastrophizing, the tendency to imagine the worst possible outcome, even when there is very little evidence. Marcus Aurelius understood the same principle in a different language. Again and again, he reminded himself that people are disturbed more by their judgments than by reality itself. Think about that. Your suffering often begins long before reality arrives. Imagine standing beside a river. The water keeps flowing, leaves drift past, branches float away. Now imagine trying to stop every leaf with your hands. You become exhausted, not because the river is attacking you, because you're fighting something that was never meant to stop. Your thoughts are that river. Most people believe mental strength means controlling every thought. Marcus Aurelius would disagree. Mental strength is choosing which thoughts deserve your attention. The rest can continue downstream without you. But here's where almost everyone gets it wrong. They think ignoring a thought means pretending it doesn't exist. It doesn't. A Stoic never denied reality. They simply refused to worship every emotion that appeared. Fear can knock on the door. It doesn't have to become your houseguest. The next time your mind creates another terrifying prediction, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself one simple question. Has this actually happened, or is my imagination rehearsing pain? That single question creates space. And in that space, your freedom begins. Yet the river becomes even more dangerous when you start believing every current is leading somewhere important. That's the mistake that quietly steals years from people's lives. Your mind is constantly searching for certainty. It wants guarantees before you make a decision. It wants proof before you take a risk. It wants complete control before you move forward. But certainty is an illusion. Imagine an archer standing before a target. He spends hours examining the wind. He measures the distance. He adjusts his stance. Then he hesitates. What if the wind changes? What if someone distracts me? What if I miss? So he waits. Another minute passes, then another. Eventually the sun begins to set. He goes home with a perfect plan, and not a single arrow released. Now imagine another archer. He prepares carefully. He breathes. He focuses. Then he lets the arrow fly. He cannot control where the wind moves after it leaves the bow, but he understands something the first archer never learned. His responsibility ends the moment the arrow leaves his hand. Epictetus taught this idea constantly. Your responsibility belongs to your choices, not to the outcome. Overthinkers reverse that order. They obsess over outcomes while neglecting action. They spend hours worrying about failure instead of taking the next step. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis. The Stoics simply called it misplaced attention, because while you're busy predicting every possible future, life is quietly passing by in the present. How many opportunities have disappeared because you waited for certainty? How many conversations never happened? How many dreams remained ideas? How many versions of yourself were never given the chance to exist? Here's what nobody tells you. Confidence is not what comes before action. Confidence is usually what comes after repeated action. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up fearless. He became stronger each time he acted, despite uncertainty. The same applies to you. Waiting until you stop overthinking before acting is like waiting for the ocean to stop producing waves before learning to swim. That day will never come. Instead, learn to move while the waves still exist. Your thoughts don't have to disappear before your life can begin. And once you realize that, another hidden truth reveals itself. Because sometimes the greatest source of overthinking isn't fear of failure, it's something far more subtle. It's your desperate need to control what was never yours to control. Sometimes the greatest source of overthinking isn't fear of failure, it's your desperate need to control what was never yours to control. Think about how much of your day is spent trying to manage things that exist entirely outside your reach. You want people to understand your intentions. You want everyone to like you. You want tomorrow to be predictable. You want every decision to guarantee success. Without realizing it, you've handed your peace to circumstances that have never belonged to you. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that the only true possession a person has is the ability to govern their own mind. Everything else, reputation, praise, criticism, fortune, even the actions of others, can change without asking your permission. Yet overthinking convinces you otherwise. It whispers that if you replay the conversation one more time, you'll discover the perfect answer. If you analyze the situation long enough, you'll eliminate every possible risk. If you worry enough today, tomorrow will somehow become easier. But has that ever happened? Has worrying ever guaranteed success? Has anxiety ever prevented disappointment? Or has it simply forced you to experience the same pain twice? Once in your imagination, and once in reality, if it ever happened at all. Seneca observed something remarkably similar when he wrote that people often suffer more in anticipation than from the events themselves. That truth remains just as powerful today. Stress activates your body's survival system. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tighten, your breathing changes. The brain cannot always distinguish between an imagined threat and a real one. So every time you replay a disaster that hasn't happened, your body prepares to survive it as though it already has. No wonder you feel exhausted. you've been fighting ghosts. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every day. At first, you barely notice the weight. Then weeks pass, months, years. Eventually, the burden feels normal. You forget what it feels like to walk freely. Overthinking works the same way. You become so accustomed to carrying imaginary problems that you mistake them for part of your personality. You begin saying things like, "I'm just an anxious person. I've always been like this. This is just how my brain works." But Marcus Aurelius would challenge that belief. Your habits are not your identity. They are practices repeated so often, they begin to feel permanent. And what is practiced can also be unpracticed. This is where modern neuroscience quietly agrees with ancient Stoicism. Every time you interrupt an unhealthy thinking pattern, instead of feeding it, you're strengthening a different pathway inside the brain. Little by little, your mind learns a new response. Not overnight, not instantly, but consistently. Mental strength isn't built during one perfect day. It's built through hundreds of ordinary moments when you choose not to feed unnecessary fear. The next time your thoughts begin racing, don't argue with them. Observe them. Picture yourself sitting beside a busy road. Cars speed past. Some are loud, some are beautiful, some are damaged. You don't chase every vehicle. You simply watch them pass. Your thoughts deserve the same treatment. Not every thought deserves a conversation. Some deserve silence, and that silence is where clarity begins. But clarity alone isn't enough, because there is another trap that catches even people who believe they're becoming mentally stronger. It's a trap so subtle that it often disguises itself as responsibility. It tells you that if you don't constantly think about the future, you're being careless. What if preparing is actually making me weaker? That's a difficult question, because planning is wise, obsessing is not. The difference is simple. Planning ends. Overthinking never does. A wise traveler studies the map before beginning the journey. He doesn't spend the rest of his life staring at the map instead of walking. Yet that's exactly what many people do. They prepare endlessly. Read another book, watch another video, wait for another sign, convince themselves they're almost ready. But almost quietly becomes years. Musonius Rufus believed philosophy wasn't meant to remain inside books. It was meant to be practiced. Knowledge that never becomes action eventually turns into another form of procrastination. Imagine a sculptor standing before a block of marble. He has the vision, he has the tools, he understands exactly what he wants to create. But every morning he circles the stone. What if I make the wrong cut? What if I ruin it? What if someone creates something better? Weeks pass. The marble never changes, not because he lacked talent, because fear convinced him that thinking was the same as creating. Life works exactly the same way. Your future isn't shaped by the conversations inside your head. It's shaped by the decisions your hands are willing to make. Here's something worth remembering. Every person you admire has acted while uncertain. Marcus Aurelius governed while uncertain. Seneca wrote while uncertain. Every inventor, artist, entrepreneur, athlete, and leader you've ever respected moved forward without possessing complete certainty. They didn't wait for fear to disappear. They learned that courage is movement despite fear, not the absence of it. This brings us to one of the most freeing ideas Marcus Aurelius ever practiced. You do not control whether today goes perfectly. You control whether you meet today with character. Those are completely different goals. One depends on the world, the other depends on you, and only one can never be taken away. Imagine waking tomorrow with one simple commitment. Instead of asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" you ask, "Who do I choose to become no matter what happens?" Notice how different those questions feel. The first makes you chase certainty. The second builds resilience. One creates anxiety. The other creates strength. That's the quiet shift that transforms a person's life. Not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because your relationship with uncertainty changes forever. And once uncertainty loses its power over you, something remarkable begins to emerge. Not confidence. Something even deeper. A calm that cannot be borrowed from success, or stolen by failure. That was the kind of strength Marcus Aurelius spent his life building, and it may be the greatest form of freedom a human being can ever possess. A calm that cannot be borrowed from success, or stolen by failure. That was the kind of strength Marcus Aurelius spent his life building, and it may be the greatest form of freedom a human being can ever possess. But this is where the real battle begins, because your mind has one habit that quietly destroys that freedom every single day. It compares. It compares your progress to someone else's, your career, your relationships, your income, your appearance, your achievements. Without realizing it, you stop living your own life and begin measuring it against lives you were never meant to live. Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to become distracted by what others were doing, but to remain faithful to his own work. That advice is even more important today. Every swipe, every notification, every perfectly edited photograph, every success story, your brain collects them all and begins asking dangerous questions. Why am I behind? Why aren't I there yet? What's wrong with me? The truth is, comparison is overthinking wearing a different mask. Instead of imagining terrible futures, you're imagining someone else's perfect present. Neither one is real. You see someone's highlight. You compare it to your private struggles. You compare their celebration to your preparation, their victory to your beginning. No one wins that comparison. Imagine two trees growing side by side. One grows quickly. Its branches stretch toward the sky within a few years. The other grows slowly. Its roots disappear deep beneath the earth before much appears above the surface. If the second tree judged itself every day by looking at the first, it would believe it was failing. But underground, something entirely different is happening. Its roots are becoming impossible to uproot. Months later, the first storm arrives. The taller tree struggles. The slower tree remains standing. Growth has never been measured only by what people can see. The strongest foundations are usually invisible. Modern psychology calls this the comparison trap. The human brain naturally notices differences. But when that habit becomes constant, satisfaction disappears. No achievement feels enough, because someone else always appears to have more. Marcus Aurelius practiced a different habit. Instead of asking whether he was ahead of someone else, he asked whether he was becoming better than the person he had been yesterday. That question changes everything, because it places your attention somewhere useful. Back on yourself, the only person you are capable of improving. Here's something few people realize. The mind cannot be grateful and obsessed with comparison at the same time. The two states compete with one another. When gratitude enters, comparison loses its grip. That doesn't mean pretending your life is perfect. It means recognizing that your value was never determined by someone else's progress. The mountain in front of you belongs to you alone. No one else can climb it. No one else can climb it for you. Which brings us to another mistake that quietly feeds overthinking. Trying to predict an ending before you've lived the middle. You decide to start something new. Immediately your mind jumps years ahead. What if this never works? What if I waste my time? What if I fail? But how could you possibly know? The story hasn't even begun. Imagine opening a book and reading only the first page, then declaring you already know how it ends. It sounds ridiculous, yet that's exactly what overthinking does. It invents endings before life has written the next chapter. Marcus Aurelius constantly returned his attention to the present moment, not because the future didn't matter, but because today's choices create tomorrow's reality. The future is built one ordinary decision at a time, one conversation, one workout, one page, one difficult choice, one act of courage. Nothing extraordinary, just repeated consistency. People often wait for a dramatic breakthrough. Marcus Aurelius looked for daily discipline, because discipline compounds. Tiny actions repeated quietly become remarkable results. The same principle applies to your thoughts. Every time you refuse to chase unnecessary fear, you become slightly calmer. Every time you return your attention to what you can control, you become slightly stronger. Every time you act despite uncertainty, you become slightly freer. Those changes seem invisible at first, until one day someone asks, "How do you stay so calm?" They think calmness appeared overnight. They never saw the thousands of quiet victories that built it. The conversations you refused to replay, the criticism you chose not to carry, the future you stopped trying to predict, the mornings you acted before fear had finished speaking. Mental strength is rarely dramatic. It's unbelievably ordinary, repeated, again and again and again, until the person who once overthought everything begins responding differently without even realizing it. That is how transformation actually happens, not through one powerful quote, not through one motivational speech, but through repeated practice. Marcus Aurelius never wrote his reflections because he believed he had mastered himself. He wrote them because he knew mastery required daily effort. He reminded himself constantly, be patient, be disciplined, return to reason, focus on your character, accept what is outside your control. Those weren't lessons for other people, they were reminders for himself. And perhaps that's the most comforting truth of all. Even one of history's greatest minds had to train his thoughts every single day. If he had to practice, so do we. The goal was never to eliminate every anxious thought. The goal was to stop letting those thoughts become your master. So the next time your mind begins racing, don't panic, smile, recognize what's happening. Your mind is doing what minds naturally do, creating possibilities. Your job is different. Your job is choosing which possibilities deserve your attention, because your thoughts make suggestions. They do not make decisions. That responsibility belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that your life becomes what your thoughts repeatedly dwell upon, not because thoughts possess magical power, but because repeated thoughts become repeated actions. Repeated actions become habits. Habits become character. And character quietly becomes destiny. So guard your attention carefully. Not every fear deserves belief. Not every opinion deserves your energy. Not every imagined future deserves today's peace. The world will always contain uncertainty. It always has. But uncertainty is not your enemy. An undisciplined mind is. Build that discipline one day at a time. One decision at a time. One thought at a time. Because the greatest victory Marcus Aurelius ever achieved wasn't over armies, it was over himself. And that same victory is available to you every single day you choose reason over panic, presence over prediction, and courage over overthinking. If today's message challenged the way you see your own mind, there's another Stoic lesson waiting for you that goes even deeper into mastering your thoughts and becoming emotionally unshakable. Watch that video next, and continue building the kind of mind that no circumstance can control. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss another lesson in timeless Stoic wisdom. Until next time, remember this: the strongest mind is not the one that thinks the most, it's the one that knows when to stop.